Drink away. Cheers and
Ooh.
welcome back. I'm Becca.
And I'm Bree, and this is Spooky Happy Hour. I just took my first drink, and that's one's a little strong.
Oh, it's gonna be that kind
I
of
know.
spooky happy
It was.
hour.
I thought it was going to be different because I just brushed my teeth. And I was like, oh, it's lemonade, so it's gonna taste a little weird. No, 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 I can taste it. No, not weird, just strong.
Just a little too strong. Well, like I said in the last episode, I think those gin cocktails, I'm drinking them again, people. It looks like water, but I'm drinking
Heck
these gin
yeah.
cocktails and they hit me pretty hard because I think I get a little a little too happy at the end of that
Mm.
video. I'm always happy
That's
though.
what it's for. This is happy hour. Sometimes we have our drinks a little strong. Sometimes we have a
Mhm.
couple. Sometimes we only have one. I guess sometimes.
Or 3. And
What have
then
you
I
been up to this
continue.
weekend, I
Um,
should say.
this weekend I've just been really busy at home, um, doing editing, and we've been filming the podcast and rewatching episodes. Last episode, I discussed about finishing American Horror Story season 12, so I was busy doing that. And then a while ago, I knew that this weekend in Calgary, which is about an hour or so away from where I am, they were holding Fan Expo, and it's usually like a 4-day thing. It'll start Thursday and end on Sundays, and this is the first year that sadly I didn't go just due to
Mm.
saving money, and also I dropped a bit of dough to go to Penhurst.
Wait, I was gonna say, like, there's so many upcoming things that like you're doing outside of the country, like to
Mhm,
meet Project Fear and go to all of these different conventions. So it makes
mhm.
sense why you would want to allocate your money differently.
Yeah, and that like, Penhurst is a paranormal con, and I've never been to one of those before, but it's also kinda the same thing in a sense, yet paracons are more directed, obviously, towards, like, ghost hunters, and you'll have, like, psychic mediums and tarot readers and people selling that kind of stuff, but Fan Expo is a nerd's dream, really. I originally
Mm.
went to my first one before I moved out here. I was gonna go by myself. They have it in Toronto, and Toronto is huge where they hold it. Usually it's bigger. They have sometimes bigger stars go there. And they just jam pack a bunch of us nerds into a building. I was gonna go by myself. I was gonna spend the money, get a nice room at the Fairmont, and be by myself, and my brother wouldn't let me, and he had never gone before, so why not? He, hopped on that wagon. He is partly the reason why I am such a nerd. He's 4 years older than me. He's an '80s baby, I'm a '90s baby, but, grew up with video games, grew up with movies. He's pretty much the reason why I am today, like, minus the horror. He's not crazy
Mm.
into that. He's kind of phased out of it now that he's a dad and he has responsibilities. So
Mm.
lame.
So is
But
it more like I don't know, like superhero, like
mhm.
movie,
Well,
Comic-Con-y type deal?
yes, so it's very like San Diego Comic-Con, except I know for that you've got to like put in for tickets and try to win tickets. This is like if you want to go for the day, it's only like 65 bucks. And then usually ahead of time on Instagram or on the website, you kind of have to like keep up with who is going. A lot of the times, and this makes so much sense, like due to scheduling, celebrities will kind of back out. So this year they have the cast of Scream, like everybody's there, like Nev Campbell, Matthew Lillard, Skeet Ulrich.
Oh, wow.
Um,
So, like, the Scream not as of, like, today, but, like, original Scream cast you're
yeah,
talking.
Minus Courtney Cox and, like, David Arquette, they are too big, I think, of names to
Mhm.
go to, like, something like this, but sometimes we get, like, Jason Momoa, and I was able to meet Jason one year, and that line was nuts,
Oh, I bet.
but, like, to get a photo with someone like that, it cost me about $200 Canadian, um, and I was
Holy
like,
crap.
"Yeah."
But, you like what you like and you like who you like, and you'll figure out, like, a way to do that, and I'm sure you don't regret it, so
No, actually, the funniest story behind the Jason Momoa one, I worked with a friend at the hair salon when I first moved here. Very nice girl. She is almost as tall as him, like very, very tall. And she was such a fan. And to me, I was like, oh, that'd be cool to meet him. And of course, we're like waiting in line. And she is like fangirling, and I never wanna be that person to, like, freak them out. I'm just like, I wanna, like I'm gonna back away. I'm gonna be like this when we meet Project Fear probably.
you're just gonna
I'm gonna be like,
fangirl on the
"Ah!"
inside, like, you can't show it on the outside, but, like, on the inside, you'll be
No.
bubbling up with fangirlness.
I'm dying. But she was so excited, and she's just like, "Do you wanna go first, or, like, should I go first?" And I just, like, looked at her, and I'm like, I think you should go first. Like, this is gonna be fun to watch." And she's, like, wearing a climbing, tank top because she knows he climbs, and she's like, "Are you gonna like, what are you gonna do in your photo?" And I'm just like, "Smile?" Like, and she's just like, "What, are you gonna ask him to do something crazy?" And I was just
Mhm.
like, "No, I don't wanna freak him out." And for someone like that, there's a lot of ladies in line, like,
Mhm.
a lot
Oh,
of
I'm
ladies
sure.
freaking out, making comments about him, and at the time, I was like, "Dude, this guy's married, and he's got one focus on one lady," and he spoke so highly of her when he was with her. So I was just like like, "No." But anyways, when you get into the photo area, you're able to see, like, maybe 3 to 4 people ahead of you get their photo taken, so people are watching, and my friend just I couldn't hear anything, but she, like, looks at him, and then he's just kinda like, "No," and her face goes like it was like the soul got sucked out of her, and
Did he, like, decline to take the picture with her or, like, decline to do what she wanted to do? Like, what do you mean? I'm
he
lost.
declined to, like, do the crazy. I think she was just like, "Do you wanna, like, do something
Um,
crazy?" And, like, in every
mhm,
photo, he, like, does, like, kinda like this hand gesture kinda thing, and, she wanted to make, like, a crazy face or something like that, and he was just like, "No," like, I think he just did the same photo for everybody, unless
mhm,
it was, like, someone was dressed up like, a lot of people were dressed up as, like, Game of Thrones, and the fun thing about Fan Expo, like, there's cosplayers, people dress up, they wanna, like, get that kinda, like, dressed up photo with their celebrity kinda thing, so
mhm.
a lot of people were like Aquaman or, like, Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones, um, so yeah, her heartbreak happened there, which was kinda sad, and,
Mm.
like, I met him, you give him a hug, you wrap your arm around each other, and you take the photo, and you go, "Peace," and, like, when I walked away, all I could see was, like, a Guinness beer sitting to the side. I'm like, "So he's like, clearly
Um,
drinking, like, you gotta have
mhm.
something," and, like, the first time I went to Fan Expo in Toronto, I ended up meeting 2 stars from the show Arrow,
I don't even
um
wanna talk about it, okay, because Stephen Amell is just, like he's just so great. Like,
he's
he's a
just
great
our
human. He wasn't that great on Arrow in the first couple seasons, but then later his acting gets way better. But anything I've seen him in afterwards, he's just, like, on par, and he
Mhm.
makes good wine.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Knocking Point Wine, people check it out.
Mhm.
I need to try Snooki's wine because she has partnered with them, and it's
I did
like
not know this.
mama's wine. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm on top of these things.
You would know this, clearly. You would know for sure.
Yup. So,
Anything Jersey Shore related, you're gonna get the tea before anybody else does.
I love Jersey Shore, love them. I wanna party with those people.
You gotta get it and then, or maybe I'll get it and then I'll take it to Penhurst or Jersey and we'll, sip on wine while we get ready for our extravaganza.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and, when I was going to go get my photo taken, it was, 2 people, so it was Stephen Amell and David Ramsey. He plays John Diggle. Um, before I even, like, we even left the hotel, I didn't know David was staying at our hotel, and this was the one I went to Fan Expo with my brother, and we get into the elevator, and we were supposed to go down to, like, the very, like, bottom floor, and I was just like, "Oh, why are we're, like, stopping, someone's coming in." The doors open, and I just get, like, this huge whiff of cologne and man, and I'm just, like, looking at my phone, not realizing who it is, and I was about to step out because I thought we were, like, on that level, but I almost bumped into him, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, whatever," and he's got this, like, leather jacket on, he's got sunglasses, and I'm just like,
Did you,
"Oh,
like, realize
shit."
who he was when he jumped like, when he bumped into you
Oh,
and you were like, "Oh, you."
yeah. Oh, yeah, and just, like, the sound of his voice, I immediately recognized it,
Mhm.
and I'm like like, me and my brother are so funny, like, I'm, like, looking over at him, and he's looking over at me like, "Don't do it," because David was, like, on his phone, and then he's just like, "Oh my god, is there, like, coffee in the lobby?" And I was like, "I'd
So he
imagine there."
sounds hungover.
He was 100% hungover, and I was, like, so paranoid I was gonna be late for my photo,
Oh,
and this dude
no.
is like he's like, "I'm supposed to be at my signing table right now, and I'm not even
Like, "I
there."
was supposed to take a picture with you 10 minutes ago, let's just get one in the elevator right
Yeah,
now."
right? And then, I'm just like my brother's, like, reading my mind, and I'm just like, "Are you David?" And my brother's just like, "Fuck off." And then he was like, "Yeah," and, like, took his sunglasses off and, like, shook our hands, asked for our names. He was the nicest person I've ever
Oh, I
met.
bet.
And then, after, like, we got out of the elevator, he's like, "It's so nice to meet you," and I was like, "Well, I'm supposed to get a photo with you and Steven in about, like, half an hour," and he was just like, "Oh my god, yes, like, I can't wait, blah, blah, blah," and then I'm, like,
How
waiting
sweet.
in
Sounds like such a nice guy.
so nice, and when I was waiting in line, the girl who was volunteering there was just like, "They're not gonna bite you." And David, like, looks at me and he goes, "Oh my god, hi, how are you? How's it going? It's so nice to see you again." And the look on Steven's face was like, "Who the fuck is this girl and how do you know
Right?
her?"
He's like, "What are you talking about, dude? How do you
Yeah,
know this chick?"
exactly, and I was just like, "Whatever," and yeah, it was such a crazy experience, like, I have a
It's
few
nice that, like, for this weekend, right, like, that it's in town, you're just, like,
Mhm.
reminiscing about all of the times
Yeah,
that you had there, and I
it's
got
so
that,
fun.
like, reminiscent feel today while I was, like I sent you that picture of, like, going
Oh,
down the
yeah.
trail. All I
Mhm.
did was, like, reminisce because well, so I took my son for a bike ride on the Ghost Town Trail today, and it's so funny that that's the name, of this trail, but, I had ridden my bike on there or gone for runs or whatever pretty much like the entire time that I've lived in Pennsylvania. And
Mhm.
so it was really cool to see my little tyke like riding his cute little bike and I'm just walking with him and I sent Becca a picture today and it was about the Ghost Town Trail. It's like all they have the mile marker pictures now
Yeah.
they're all like little ghosts that say like Ghost Town
So
Trail on them, which they
cool.
never had whenever I was younger, so it was the first time that
Oh,
I was seeing them, but, yeah, it was just this, like, railway that used to connect all of these coal mining towns.
okay.
So, these towns that's all that they were, is that people would come in on the train, they would do their business in the coal mines, right? And then they would either go to the next one or the next one or the next one. And it was just this influx of coal mining because that was like one of the biggest producers of coal in the country, like at that time. And then
Mhm.
after the railroads kind of went away and the modern car came up, like now all of these towns are like considered like ghost towns, right? So they didn't get developed until really much later, but one of the mining towns that the trail connects to is called Weirham, and it was, like, the largest of all of the towns that were nearby. It had 230 houses, a hotel, a company store, a jail, a bank, like,
Whoa.
it had all of the things, so it was pretty poppin'. The uncle of President Franklin Roosevelt actually developed that town. So
Really?
and there's, like, a couple kind of remnants from that town that still stand today, like, those brick and like stone foundations from old houses that like after they sit for a while, that's the only thing that's left. There's
Mhm.
a bunch of them in all of these fields and like back in the woods. And then the Weirham has a cemetery, and that's probably the place that I've investigated the most.
Okay.
So it's you have to like go up these really winding roads. It like sits on top of this big hill, and there's some private property like a little bit further back, but you have to pass the cemetery before you would get to that person's private property. So
Mhm.
when we go up to investigate, it's pretty late anyway, so we don't see a lot of like traffic, but they were all made of the caskets were all made of wood. So you can
Oh.
actually see the divots in the ground and the caskets that has like risen up, and they make these mounds that are just really like grassy and mossy. And
Mhm.
so many gravestones are everywhere, but a lot of them you can't. It sounds like it looks like the engraving is kind of gone, but I would say probably 90% of the graves are in Russian or like
Interesting.
some sort of, I think, like
Polish or something.
yes, and I probably Polish, something around, like, Eastern Europe, right? Like,
Mhm.
because that's where a lot of the settlers of this land came from is more like Eastern Europe, and that's what I mean, Polish food is huge around here, so it makes sense that,
Hmm.
yeah, a lot of
I
Polish
don't know
people
why I
live
said
there.
that, but
Well, yeah, no, it is, it's a huge,
Polish.
a huge cultural consideration around here. Most of our food is like from that region here. So I've gotten so much stuff in that cemetery. Um, the spirit box, I don't know why, is so active there. And so, for people,
Hmm.
just as a refresher that don't know about the spirit box, it is a small device that you have a little headset for. It scans all these radio frequencies, and they do it at all of these different speeds. So it's said that spirits can manipulate those frequencies. And if you hear a voice come through on the spirit box, it is supposed to be that spirit's voice. So
Mhm.
I've heard my name on the spirit box there.
Ooh,
We
creepy.
got a little girl, who told us that she was 6, and her name
Oh,
was Sarah.
really?
Um, and then we had probably one of the scariest encounters though, like, we had been there for a while, and the person that I was investigating with was like, "I don't really have a great feeling, like, I feel like we should just, like, end it." I was like, "We barely like, nothing really happened, like, we barely felt
Mhm.
anything, like, maybe got a few responses." I just was not done, and this, like, really sinister voice, it was really low and, like, just, like, almost like a growling voice said, "You need to leave."
Oh.
And I didn't hear it with my own 2 ears, but afterwards, because I had been, like, filming on my phone and, like, little snippets of the night, but afterwards, I heard it, because I was holding it and I didn't even hear it, but the person that I was with did, and they just looked at me and they were like, "We need to go now," and I was like, "Okay, dude, let's rock and roll then." So I, like, jump in the Jeep and we're driving down, like, the really windy road to go home, and his radio, like, it something interferes with the radio, and you could,
Mm.
like, hear it, like, just get all, like, garbled, and something
Stop.
happened, and then, like, it went back to it, and what was crazy is that when we went back this like, the time after that to investigate, we got the same things that, like, we normally do. It's a really active location, and when we were driving back home, it was the same thing. The radio, like, got, like, all types of different frequencies, and it was kind of just, like, fizzling
Oh.
out. It was crazy. But while I was on the ghost town trail today, I was thinking about all of the ghost stories that are, like, kind of from this region, and it's really
Mhm.
cool because it's like, oh, I've been creating my own ghost stories to tell about all of these different locations, all of this history that, um I just, like, felt like something brushed my shoulder. It was really weird. That's
Well,
why I was
last
like, "Oh."
episode, we had some orbs floating over on your end, so maybe my attachment's over there.
Right? I don't know what's happening. I thought it was my hair, so
Sharing
I
is
went to go like
caring.
this to, like, move it out, and then I was like, "Wait a minute,
Yeah.
like, nothing's there. My hair is not there. Weird. It's crazy."
Mm.
But this
Freaky
place
deaky.
does have so much, so much paranormal activity like we've talked about because a lot of the towns here are really connected to when the country first formed. So there's
Mhm.
just so much history. And I think that, well, much like some of the locations that like we've already like reviewed, I feel like this location is very similar to locations around here, because it's in Virginia. So we take you back to St. Albans Sanitorium in Radford,
Mhm.
Virginia, and it holds like some of the same like qualities. I think just the places on the East Coast, right? Like there's so much history. There's so many like ghost stories that are passed down from like families, just like I'm gonna tell like my kid and my kid's gonna tell them. So I'm not exactly sure if like a lot of the ghost stories that I've heard around this place, especially at the Ghost Town Trail, are true or not. There is a book one of my like very distant cousins had written it, and I haven't like read it in its entirety, but I think some of those are also passed down stories from people on like her side of the family and things that she's heard around town too. So just being on there today, I was like, not only was I reminiscing about my own childhood stuff, but I was like, I wonder if I'm going to see anything.
Yeah, that's super cool. We also have like a creepy cemetery in town. And I've been there a couple times and I'm probably gonna go back this summer. If like whoever follows me on Instagram, there's a couple photos on there. And there are some graves. Like there's like you go to one side and it's all like regular like headstones and stuff like that. And then the other side, it's a very small portion, but same thing. And I don't know if it's Polish or something like it's written in different languages, and the stones date back to like the 1800s. I think someone's like 1860, 1886. And some of the graves are still like surrounded by like fences or
Mhm.
like, and there's like giant crosses and stuff like that. I've never like investigated there, but in front of it, for the company that I work for, we just opened this hotel last summer, and I've heard some people kind of say like it used to be a Holiday Inn, now our company took it over, and I guess a staff member who worked for the Holiday Inn stated that they saw a little boy running in that hotel. And then someone who works for our company that doesn't know this other staff member from the other hotel, they also saw a little boy running. And they are currently building and expanding this hotel to make it a Nordic spa. And it's slowly backing towards the cemetery. And I'm like, guys, we're going to have a poltergeist
Right? You're going
situation.
to be like the next freaking Stanley Hotel or something.
I
Like
know.
The Shining 2.0 is going to be filmed at your hotel.
Well, we have about 5 hotels in town. And one of them, people have stated on Reddit that they saw a figure standing in the bedroom, and someone else noticed it as well. And this hotel is quite old. So we've just kind of like renovated it and renamed it and rebranded it. But I'm just like to some of the COOs and VPs, I'm like, I'm gonna stay the night there. And they're like,
Yeah, why
Becca,
not?
what the heck? It's so funny. The other day all the bigwigs like go into one of the boardrooms, and then I'm just sitting having lunch, and the boardroom is kind of like off to like the kitchen area. And the COO comes out and he's just like, Becca, were you in here? And I'm like, no. And he's like, were you weren't watching TV or anything? And I was like, no. Like, yes, I'm sneaking into the boardroom to watch
I'm
my shows.
working, okay?
I'm working, guys. And he's just like, well, why is Most Haunted playing on the TV? And I'm
I
like,
like how you're the culprit for that, right? Like
usually,
they go to you first and they're like, "Did you turn this on here?
yeah.
Are you doing
Well, it's
podcast
like,
stuff at work?"
everybody is just like, I love like hiking and biking and doing
Mm.
this. And I'm like, I love ghosts and hunting ghosts
And
and
everything that
watching
comes with
people.
it.
Yeah, everything, all paranormal. So now they're just like, our office admin's a little on the wacky side.
It's so funny. And for everybody else who also is that person at work,
Hmm.
at home, in your friend group, this episode is for you because if you thought last episode was
Yes.
jam-packed, this episode is pretty jam-packed too. So let's get right into it. We're
Hmm.
reviewing St. Albans Sanatorium today. And in the 1700s in Radford, Virginia, Native American tribes and early white European settlers tried to coexist along the New River watershed. With this being a natural resource that both communities wanted to solely use, tensions grew and grew between the two groups. In 1755, the Shawnee tribe attacked and killed an early colonist, Philip Barger, by beheading him. Not only was he decapitated, but his head was placed in a bag and given to another member of that community to send a message. This was their land. The rest of the colonists wanted to send a message of their own, and they started scalping Native Americans, which was an unfortunate common practice in assimilating Native Americans into European culture, stripping them of their own rights and customs.
Over 100 years later, before it was St. Albans Sanatorium, this massive red brick building was constructed to be the Lutheran Boys' School by George Miles. Historians purport that the original intention was to reform these troubled boys into gentlemen. Reading suggests that this boys' school was meant to have them excel in all areas of being gentlemen, so much so that boys grew very competitive with one another, and some bullied others so badly, a few of them actually committed suicide. Terrible. It is reported that bullying was seen as being tough, and those that couldn't respond well to it were considered weak. This led to homicides among the youth, which were reportedly linked to their competitiveness in sports. The leader of the boys' school died, and in 1911, the school was shut down for good.
In 1916, the school was converted to a sanatorium and would operate for the next 80 years. The new owner, Dr. John C. King, had a vision for the sanatorium, but just like George Miles and his vision for the boys' school, it did not come to fruition. His vision was to provide patients better accommodations, free place to roam, and proper places to exercise and play. However, that was not able to be done. The staff ratios were 48 staff to 6,509 patients.
Jeez.
That is not enough, not even
Nuts.
nearly sufficient to be able to make this vision come to fruition. So in the 1900s, psychiatric treatments, they weren't like how they are today. Doctors and staff alike were desperate to help these individuals, and they went to very great lengths to try to cure them.
Terrible. It's just so crazy to me. Insulin induced comas, lobotomies, electroconvulsive therapy, and many other procedures were often performed at St. Albans and left patients nearly brain dead, with memory loss, fractured skulls, or even dead. One theme of procedures was hydrotherapies. They were often conducted in bathrooms where they were supposed to be places that seemed like a day spa, which was King's vision. Colonial Ghosts, a tour guide company in the area, reported that this couldn't have been further from the truth. Patients were wrapped in an icy cold towel and strapped into streaming water vats, where they were confined and immobile for days. One of the bathrooms, nicknamed the suicide bathroom, was the site of 4 suicides.
So sad. And one of those suicides was by a resident, and her name was Rebecca. The
Not
legend
me.
states the legend states that she had a miscarriage during her time there, and due to her grief and loss, kept the baby in a jar in her closet. Chuck Thornton, a security guard at the property, reported that she would take the baby out of the jar and sing lullabies while she rocked it. The staff then figured out what she had been doing, and they took the baby. She became so depressed and hopeless that she committed suicide in the bathroom. Thousands of deaths had occurred on the property, and they're all said to have created layers of spiritual energy, which lead this institution to be severely haunted.
So sad. And yeah, like when I first heard about, not because we share a name, because my full name is Rebecca, but nobody calls me that. Please don't call me that.
I don't
And
even think that I
do
knew that until this moment in time. Like, I just,
really?
figured out that I just figured that was your name, that was your deal.
No, it's too formal for me, and it
Mhm.
just never felt right. And don't ever call me Becky. Becky only comes out when I'm blackout. So
Oh, no. Maybe I'll meet Becky here soon. No, I'm just kidding. Mine's
maybe she'll come out at Penhurst. Who knows?
right. Mine's full, my full name is Brianne, and I don't go by Brianne. I go by Brie because I don't know if people
Mhm.
can't read or don't understand different vowels and their sounds, but people call me Brianna or Brianna. And I'm
Oh,
like, dude, there's
Brianna.
no A at the end of my name. There's no I in my name. It just says Brie and Ann. Don't really know how that
Mhm.
gets confused, but yeah, so we go by our nicknames. Brie and
Yeah,
Becca.
yeah, totally. This is my name. I'm gonna have to change it. But yeah, like super, super sad. It was just almost like something out of a movie with
Mhm.
that story, with like loss of a child and then putting it in a jar and like leaving it on the windowsill, and
It's like
rocking
being a
it.
mom, I'm just like, I could not imagine, like, losing my child ever.
Mhm.
However, like, I couldn't imagine losing it. 1, she's already there for whatever reason, right?
Mhm.
So there is something more going on than what she's experiencing, and they don't really know if she was pregnant before she came to the sanatorium
Oh,
or if she got
right.
pregnant at the sanatorium, which leads me to believe too, what was going on there? Right? Like,
Mhm.
was it like the other sanitariums and the state schools and the asylums of that entire region? Like, if you had so many of these, like, small staffed, these thousands of patients, one, there's clearly, like, maltreatment there, right? They're
Mhm.
probably malnutrition, they're not getting what they need, like, there's no way that that could have been possible, and so you figure it probably led to a lot of abuse, I would
Mhm.
guess. So we don't know if she was pregnant before or after she arrived there, which I
Or
think is, like,
even
really sad.
situations like that too, like, sometimes, like, I don't know, like, there's abuse, like, from staff members, like, how do you know the child
Mhm.
wasn't, like, a staff member's?
Right.
Like, and then having someone, like, find out that she's, like, singing lullabies to it, it seems something very innocent, but it does also seem really kinda dark and creepy to
Very
do that.
morbid.
Very morbid, like, to do something like that and then to have it taken away from you, and
Well, yeah, it
then
was like the ultimate loss, so there was nothing left to live
mhm.
for, and she ended up killing herself. So
Yeah.
not only so you have Native Americans, you have a young boys' school, and then you have the sanatorium where probably a lot of abuse happened, a lot of mistreatment, neglect even. So tell us about the haunted history. What's been
The
going on
haunted
at this place?
history. There's a lot of things going on at St. Albans. This crazy stuff. Spirits of Native Americans, young boys, and psychiatric patients are said to appear in forms of full bodied apparitions and audible voices. Floating lights and apparitions of the suicide victims are reported to be seen in the bathroom. Another spirit, under the name Red, is known to grope female visitors with an icy cold hand. Aggressive activity is also known to occur here through though hitting, pushing, and grabbing as well. And of course, the most infamous of them all is the spirit we were just talking about, Rebecca, who seems to emotionally drain people, specifically women, by the sounds of it. She seems to just kind of put her grief onto you or share it with you, and get people to be super emotional and start crying, kind of thing.
Yeah, and the last time that the crew was here, they were doing Trail to Terror, the documentary that we did a few
Mhm.
episodes ago. And so, for a reference, we did not get into that location during
Mhm.
that episode. We decided to go with our favorite locations during that episode instead. But the crew did first visit St. Albans in 2015, and while they're filming Trail to Terror, Chelsea had this really harrowing experience. It was in the
Mhm.
bowling alley, it was in the basement room. They hear these consistent noises and footsteps, and it appears to like be approaching them during the group investigation. And then this sends the group into like a total panic mode, and they really feel like they could have been attacked. So they just bail out at this point.
Mhm.
And while outside, they start to hear these chants that appear to be like Native
Yes.
American. To me, I hear all these like horses galloping and like this soldiers preparing for a fight. Like you can hear this back and forth, like type of almost like battle cries. And to me, that was like the creepiest, craziest residual type of noises on the whole road trip at that point in time
Mhm.
in the documentary. But as we know, the location before that, Hillview Manor, that's kind of where Chelsea just like checks out.
Mhm.
But after being in this location and Chelsea sleeping alone and albeit the worst sleeping location, she hears all this
Yeah.
shuffling and you can hear these footsteps just charge towards her and she screams for Dakota. She's super upset. She's crying. She's reiterating, "Hey, I'm freaking done with this, guys. I told you about it beforehand. I did not want to sleep here." And ultimately, by the end of the
Mhm.
night, she decides to go home. And the crew packs up even early. They weren't even done with their overnight and they packed up early to leave. So that's the background. This is the precursor to their return to St. Albans.
Mhm.
And I know
Yeah.
that some of the history they didn't even have before. So they got
No.
more history this time around.
Yeah, 'cause, I remember reading my notes for this for from Trail to Terror, and I think they still have that same. I think he was a security guard. He's the guy with the glasses. He's very like creepy, like you don't want to stay here kind of thing. But I think he mentions like last time there was a goat man that
Mhm.
was supposedly there. Like people would say like he had the legs of a goat and the body of a human or reverse kind of thing. And yeah, Dakota even says like he did some like searching and he found some new information. Um Also with that, like, chanting outside and Trail to Terror, the skeptic in me was just like, "It could have been a drunk guy at night."
It could have been, like, something, like, pretty far away, and it's just, like,
Yeah.
reverberating to where they are, like, maybe there's a
Mhm.
bar in town and someone was having a bar fight at that
Yeah.
time. We don't really know,
Don't know.
but they do believe it was more, like, Native American chants, and, like, whenever
Mhm.
I'm listening to it, like, I was envisioning people on horses and, like,
Oh.
guns being, like, set off and, like, people falling off that's kinda, like, just the vision that I came
See,
to my head whenever I heard it.
I was thinking more of, like, dancing around a fire. That's
Ooh.
the sound that I get because there's a lot of, like, dancing and rituals and stuff with well, not necessarily rituals, but, traditions, I should say, with Native
Sure.
Americans. Um, but yeah, in the back of my mind, I think Dakota even said it in Trail to Terror, like, it could be just some rando in the bushes because it's, like, the parking lot, and then there's, like, a bit of a cliff. Sorry, I'm,
Mhm.
like, holding the ducky today. It has made its appearance,
As you
everyone.
don't let the duck fall over the cliff, the imaginary one that you're making. Don't let it go.
Whee! Sploosh into the forest where the drunk people are. No.
It could be I mean, it
It
really
could
could
be,
be,
yeah. Yeah.
and I think in Trail of Terror, that was kind of like the middle, right? Like, they went out, they took a break, they heard this chanting, but when they go back in, like, I mean, the guys didn't get off easy either.
Mm-mm. No, like, even though Chelsea had it the worst, by far, the guys definitely did not get off easy. Like,
Mm-mm.
we can't forget about you guys.
Mhm.
Dakota hears a noise almost like the sound of, like, bells or a chime. It could be, like, a residual sound from, like, an electroshock therapy, like, machine maybe. Dakota was also woken up by the noises throughout the night, and it's almost like shuffling or maybe a door sliding across to open into another room. And then for everyone who doesn't know, Alex was not in Trail to Terror. We had another friend um, by the name of Colin. He ends up capturing something. It was like someone whispering on his microphone while he was asleep, kind of thing.
They had so much stuff happen, and so that is for all y'all's reference, if you hadn't watched Trail to Terror, go back and do it, and then listen to the episode that we did on Trail to Terror. So
Mhm.
that is a summary of what their experience already has been. So that's what they're bringing into this
Mhm.
location. And naturally, Dakota's gonna be really worried because he was so upset with
Mhm.
himself in the documentary because he kind of, I think, pushed Chelsea to just go with the experiment. He even says in the documentary, like, sometimes you get screwed, bud. Like, you
Mhm.
drew the worst room and you drew, like, a worse one before. I'm sorry, but that's the nature of the
Yeah.
experiment. And you know what? If we come back and do this again, like another time, he's like, then maybe we'll do something different. But he was very kind of like dismissive in that moment and like really nonchalant of like, well, this is what you signed up for, so go do it. But then when Chelsea has her experience, he's
Mhm.
really remorseful. And he
Mhm.
thinks like, "Oh my god, I did this to my sister. She had a terrible experience. She had a horrible time. Not only did she have this terrible experience, but she leaves. They don't
Mhm.
have her for the last stop of the road trip." So naturally, he's going to be really worried, and I think that he's very uneasy to bring it up to everybody because everybody, like, none of them got off scot-free.
No.
The pit stop that they have is to empty the tank of the RV, and to make
So
matters
random.
worse, they start giving hints about this location, and to me, I just feel like that's really shitty for for lack of a better word. I don't know.
Un Unintended, and it was just, like, the most random pit stop because for, like, previous episodes, like, one was, like, that creepy amusement park, and then we're going to Rock City and seeing some views, and it's just like, "How do I empty my RV?"
Shitter, really, how do
Shitter's
I
full. The shitter's
we
full.
gotta walk, guys, so
And
they
then
took
to
us on
make
that little adventure, that was great.
And to make it worse, like, Chelsea even says it, like, why is, like, you can literally see it go in, and I'm like, "Why are we filming
Yeah,
this?
why did
I
we,
don't
like,
wanna see
pan
this."
to the slush and the sludge just go out from this tube into wherever it goes into? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, again, super shitty.
It's
So,
so
after
gross.
that, though, they do end up, showing a lot of the interviews that they did, and
Mhm,
some of those interviews that they do naturally, but then they also, I think, branch out to do some different interviews too. So, one of the paranormal groups that have already investigated this location before, Twisted
mhm.
Paranormal, I believe is their name. They're made up of like a man-woman duo. I don't know their relationship, but
No.
they meet and they go over some of their tales about what's happened when they've investigated at St. Albans. And they tell the crew about this really emotional, like emotionally effective experience that the woman had had at
Mhm.
their last investigation. And they actually show a clip of her. I mean, she's severely affected. She's like
Yes.
really crying. She's asking the spirit of Rebecca to lift this heavy burden of grief and loss that she had felt upon her. So they're getting now paranormal groups experiences before they go into this location. So not only do they have the eyewitness testimony of people that work there, like the security guard, the owners, and other people that maintain the building, but they're also
Mhm.
getting new information from paranormal groups that have already investigated this before them.
Yeah, and that was just like, the way she was crying was just overwhelmed, like, she seemed overwhelmed, she's, like, holding flowers for Rebecca, and she's just telling her to, like, "Let this go, like, let it get it off of me," because even, like, I've been in a situation where it's just, like, you feel these feelings and you're just like, "What is going on?" But I feel like this spirit just wants to share this grief almost, like, feel
Well,
what I
it's like
feel.
somebody else take this from me too, right?
Yeah.
Like I have been doing this for however many years, and
Mhm.
this feels like the day that I committed suicide because of this grief and loss situation from losing my child and it being taken from me. And so it makes
Yeah.
sense that a ghost would want to put that experience onto you so that you know what's going on. And I don't think I've ever been like, I mean, I've been like physically affected, like we've talked about in previous episodes, but I think one of the really emotionally effective experiences, and I don't think that it was from spirit whatsoever. I think it was just being there. But I did a solo backpacking trip throughout Europe, and I spent the most time in Germany for my 25th birthday. That was my present to myself. I'm like, I'm turning 25. I'm backpacking across Europe alone. I don't give a shit. Like
Euro
I'm
trip.
going. I'm going. And I did. And I mean, I had every single day pretty much out of like, I think I was there for like 11 days. I think it was
Nice.
11 days that like, and I was in a bunch of different countries, but I spent the most significant time in Germany. I did this tour of a concentration camp at Dachau,
Mhm.
and that was probably the most emotionally affecting experience. And when I went with my best friend to Anne Frank's house in Amsterdam,
Oh.
that was also, like, those 2 historical experiences, I think that, like, I really felt a lot of the emotion that was tied to everything that was still there, and
Mhm.
I had really great tour guides, so they were also telling very vivid stories, but I have felt that way, where you're just overcome with emotion, and you're
Mhm.
crying, and you don't know how to necessarily, like, get it out. Right? Like,
Yeah.
she had to ask this spirit, like, "Please just, like, take this from me." And I don't
Mhm.
think that I was being affected by spirit, I think I was just being affected by, like, the historical location.
Mhm.
Everybody knows about Nazi Germany, everybody knows about
Mhm.
Anne Frank, you know?
Mhm.
And being in those places, like, standing in the place where other people would have, and also seeing pictures of me standing in a place and what it looked like at a certain time, I think it was enough to overwhelm pretty much anybody. And
Oh,
those are
for
such
sure.
unique experiences, right? Like, whenever
Mhm.
you can know that your emotions aren't your own.
Mhm. Yeah, like, I've never really had that experience, but, like, I've seen things that have, like, taken my breath away, like a
Mhm.
gorgeous waterfall kinda thing, like, the first time I went to Iceland and I did the Golden Circle, I was there only for 5 days for my she was my boss and a friend of mine. She was getting married, she was just like, "I'm getting married in Iceland, blah, blah, blah." And I rented a car and I was like, "You know what?" Like, I had never traveled by myself. I was technically by myself, even though I knew her and her husband now, and some of her friends, which were like clients. But I was like, I'm gonna like drive around, see things. And I literally had like the breath like knocked out of me when I saw this waterfall. I was just like, holy shit, like Iceland is probably like my favorite place to like go and see and visit. And there's so many views, but I've never had like an emotional paranormal experience.
Mhm.
More
But you
like,
get that, like, sensation, you know, how it just,
yeah,
like, kinda overtakes you and you have
yeah,
no control of that.
yeah. Like, I've had that like physical, like what's happening to me. I'm kind of confused. Like I've talked about previously a few times going to those ruins. But yeah, I couldn't imagine like standing there and seeing that and like knowing, I feel like knowing the history of a place will really kind of affect your experience as well.
Absolutely, it's kinda like how we talked about last episode with that cognitive bias, right? Like, when you have so
Mhm.
much information about a place, you kinda have these expectations of when you go in, of what you're going to actually experience. You look like you need to get topped off, and so do I, so let's rock this out together.
Then I'm mixing flavors.
You hear that, Spotify?
I'm sorry, that sounds like someone peeing. I'm so
I
sorry.
don't know what you dump when you pee, but I'm just kidding.
Oh my
For our
god.
Spotify listeners, we just decided to refill, so I hope that you get a refill as well, and we're gonna cheers because we're talking about really great, like, unique
Cheers.
experiences, and then what you're about to hear is another unique one. So, cheers to
Yes.
that.
Cheers and have a sippy poo.
Mhm. So this investigation is a little bit different than the ones previously. They do a little
Mhm.
bit something that they have done, well, they've done in the future, but at this time, this is the first time they really have done it, right? They
Mhm.
usually go to their pit stop and they read the packet there, whether it's
Right.
at like this creepy location or what maybe they're in the RV. But this time Dakota says, "You know what? I'm really worried about what they're going to say." So spring it on them, like, "We're gonna be at this location and we're gonna do the packet read." So they
Mhm.
actually pull up to St. Albans to do the packet read, and Tanner starts saying, "No, no, 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 no," because he knows exactly where they are, and it takes Chelsea just a little bit of a time. It's really until the RV stops and Tanner starts freaking out. She sees it, and then she's like, "Oh, man, I should have known about this location when you said the boiler room," because that's where the spirit of Red is said to really wreak his havoc. And it's the room adjacent from the bowling alley where she had her experience sleeping alone. So,
Mhm.
as you can imagine, she's pretty pissed.
Yeah, and, like, Tanner, just, like, when they're pulling up, he's just like, "Oh, no. Oh, no.
We've been here
Oh,
before.
no. We've been there before. I hate this place."
He's like, "Are we just doing the packet read here?" Dakota's like,
Oh
"No.
my god.
Like,
And, like,
we're gonna do it, and then later tonight, like, we're gonna go investigate again."
literally, when we, like, take notes for this, I feel like it's better for me to, like, watch it twice.
Mm.
Um, the second time I watched this, I watched Dakota, and just the look on his face when Tanner's like, "Oh, no," and he's just like, and then I looked at Alex in the background filming, and he's just like, "What is
Alex
happening?"
has no idea what's going on because, again, Alex wasn't in Trail of Terror, so he doesn't
No.
know where he's at. But Dakota's obviously been there and he knows what's going on. Chelsea and Tanner are just figuring it out for themselves too. So I'm sure it's just a giant clusterfuck of confusion in the RV at this
Mhm.
point until it all gets like kind of figured out. And
Yeah.
it's so funny when I watched it this morning, just as a refresher. Chelsea, you can see that she has her, like, retainer in, like, her little clear retainer,
Oh, I didn't even
and
know.
she's looking at him, and she's all irritated and annoyed, and I can just, like, kind of envision this conversation happening in, like, the hallway of their childhood home, fighting over,
Mhm.
like, bathroom time, and she's like, "I'm so annoyed with you."
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 'cause she, like, when the camera's just on her and she's just like, the look on her face, she's like, "You should know."
Yeah, she's like, "I've been here before and I didn't finish," and he's like, "This isn't why I picked this location." But I do think that she needs some redemption, and like we
Mhm.
said, nobody got off scot-free. So they need to go
No.
back and they need to figure out, like, what were they experiencing before? They showed a lot of fear at that point in time because they weren't doing their experiments like they are now, and to
No.
see, okay, let's push it to the limit and what are we really going to get? S But right away, I mean, literally right away, things start to
Mhm.
happen, like unexplained noises are coming from the second floor as like soon as they
Mhm.
walk into the main floor. And as they make their way up, they like start hearing like more footsteps. So Tanner decides like I'm gonna be the person that goes, and he's like
Yes.
walking up to the third floor. And Dakota even says, like, dude, how do you even have like the balls to do this right now?
Yes,
Tanner's
he
like,
was,
I
like,
just want to explore. Like
so
someone might be up here.
shocked.
I
Yeah.
think Tanner's ready to like throw down at any moment because
Mhm.
we'll get to this in future episodes, but he's like, "You better lace up, bitch." Like, he's just ready to fucking go at any moment. So he's like, "I think I hear somebody up here. I'm going up the stairs." And everybody else is like, "Dude, what are you doing?"
Yeah, yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, because he just, like,
Mm.
goes up there, but I feel like he also hears, like, another step, like, something is, like, stepping down because it's not him, and then he kinda,
As
like,
he's, like,
pans
stepping
up.
up, I
Yeah.
feel like he thinks someone's stepping down, so, like, he
Yeah.
gets taken aback for a second, which is crazy because, like, you've had that energy where, like, you just feel it come on, you
Mhm,
know? Like, I was talking in the other episode where I'm laying in bed and I, like, turn and I look because I think something's there, and so
mhm,
I think that when he was going up, he felt it coming down and then he heard it, and it was like, "Whoa." So he takes this, like, step back before they all get up to the 3rd floor, and then they
mhm.
start feeling, like, noticeably colder air, and for
Yeah.
people that don't know, generally, if there's any like temperature changes, it doesn't always have to be cold, but I
Mhm.
do think that cold is much more associated with some type of spirit being there than it is when it's hot. So
Yeah.
they do end up feeling noticeably colder air as they continue, and
Mhm.
they hear a lot of stuff after that, which kind of corroborates their feeling of it being colder.
Yeah, and they just get to, like, the platform of the 3rd floor, like, Dakota, Chelsea, and Alex are still, like, kinda on the stairs, and then, like, Tanner's by the door, and they hear, like, this weird, like, bang, and then Chelsea hears, like, a squeak or a creak, and that could have been, like, one of them on the stairs, or,
Right.
like, could have been a mouse, like, we don't know,
That was the first thing that
um
popped into my brain. Like I heard like a little like squeak and I was like, "Oh, a mousy."
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, stair squeak, but, like, I don't
Mhm.
know, like, it's a building, so maybe they're not that type of stair, but
It could have been
yeah,
any it was something that really freaked them out, and it was loud.
it was pretty loud. And then eventually they get the courage to go up there, and they go into the suicide bathroom. So this is the 3rd floor. And then Dakota's the one that goes into the suicide bathroom, and then his ear just starts ringing randomly. And then for those who don't really know, and if you're not like really into that spiritual stuff, but in spiritual terms, the ears are seen as one of the most important receptors of messages in the spirit world. While ringing in the right ear is generally considered to carry a positive message, ringing in the left is usually signified by some kind of warning or negativity. So like this has happened to me randomly. I'll be sitting on the couch and like my ear will start ringing, and usually my go-to is who's talking about me. Like some
Is
bitch
it
is
shit
talking about me.
talking or is somebody bragging
Yeah.
about how cool I am? I don't know.
Right? Like, could be anything. And I'm like a super spiritual person. Some people will debunk this. I think they call it like tinnitus or something like that,
Yeah.
where it randomly happens. But me, I'm always looking for like those angel numbers or like, oh my God, it's 11:11 on the clock, or I see like 555 on someone's license plate, or I see a rainbow. I'm like, it's a sign.
Well, I think
Thing.
that, like, it's a cultural consideration, right? Like,
Hmm.
people are spiritual, like, nobody else would think to, like, debunk someone's culture of a
Hmm.
certain thing, right? Like, if
Hmm.
somebody has a certain ailment or they say a certain thing or they even sleep a certain pattern, you know, like,
Yeah.
it's said that, like, some of those things get disrupted, and a lot of the time it's about, like, what you believe.
Hmm.
So, who's to say that because you do believe this and that is your own culture that you're representing whenever you have these experiences, to me it's like who's to say that you're wrong in doing it because and connecting to it that way because we would never shame anybody else to connecting it to their culture.
Very
And I
true.
think that in this type of like paranormal world, this is a culture in and of itself, right?
Mhm,
And you can have several different belief systems. However, when you have these experiences and whatever first comes to your mind, I think you have to take one, not only with a grain of salt, but two, you
mhm,
have to take it as that person's reality. And because perception is reality at this point.
mhm.
So you have to take that reality of someone and see it through this cultural lens, because if you don't, I think you miss out.
Yeah, that's so true. It's no fun when you're, like, debunking all the time anyways.
Well, and you're challenging your belief system, which I think
Mhm,
is great, but sometimes, like, you just know when you know it.
mhm. It's always, like, a
And
gut feeling to me. Like,
and I think that
very
happened in this episode a lot.
Mhm, mhm,
Because something will happen and then they automatically assign this meaning to it or where it
mhm,
came from. And in previous episodes, like, you'll hear Dakota say, like, "Oh, I'm tripping," or "I thought I saw something, but maybe no, I didn't." And in this episode, they don't do that.
no, they
They don't
don't.
try to debunk anything. And I think it was just an environment where they just took their gut instinct for what it was, and because they had already been there a time before, I think that they
Mhm,
kind of had that as, like, a reference, so when they did say something that they were experiencing, they knew or really felt in their gut that that's what it was.
mhm. Maybe, since they'd been there before, they're just like, "Let's tippy-toe around this. Let's watch our backs a little bit." And then after they are upstairs, I don't think anything really happens near the suicide bathroom. So who knows? Like maybe that's one of the spirits that committed suicide is just like connecting with Dakota, or it could have been like Rebecca, like warning him because depending on which ear it was, she could have been warning him about the rest of his night.
Yeah, which would definitely be foreshadowing for what's to come. So they don't get as
Mm-hmm.
much except for, like, kind of Dakota physically reacting to this environment. So they do go to the sub-basement area and they wanna
Mm-hmm.
see if they connect with the spirit of Red, and he's the
Mm-hmm.
aggressive ghost that hurts people, and the crew believes that Chelsea kind of encountered him last time, like, the
Yeah.
footsteps and the charging at her. They
Mm-hmm.
think that it's Red, and that makes the most sense because he is the one to assault people, but really wants to get at women. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and in this time that they're down there, Dakota starts asking his questions, and that's kind of his niche, right? Like, he
Yeah.
knows what to ask and how to get this ball rolling, and he starts getting it rolling, and rolling it does because he asks for
Mm-hmm.
spirit to touch one of them, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily get too much activity. I think that they think, "Oh, we got off scot-free, it's okay," and then they hear this audible noise, and at the same time, Dakota's ears start to ring again.
Yeah.
So, who knows, like, they already gave maybe possibly a warning, right? And then they
Mhm.
go down to this basement and maybe he gets another one. And
Maybe.
I think at this point in time, they're like, "We need a break."
Mhm. Yeah, and then when they go back to the gear room on their way there, Tanner notices, like, this weird-looking handprint on Dakota's shoulder, and he kinda, like, puts his hand over it, and it, like obviously, my hands are tiny, but
Is are gigantic. Tanner's hand takes up, like, half of Dakota's back when he tries to do it,
my tiny hand. But,
right?
like, when he puts it over top, it's just, like, maybe an inch taller than him, like, the fingers look long. It just, like, made me picture, like, a skeleton just, like, placing their hand, and it
Mhm.
was, like, this white residue, and when I was watching this, I was kinda, like, making note of that in my head. I'm like, "Does he back into something? Does he hit
Mhm.
something?" Because we all know Dakota can be a little bit clumsy and
Right, if
bangs
there's a
into
toilet
things.
everywhere
Yeah.
or just, like, a railing, he is super kind of clumsy, like, you see all these times where he, like, runs into something and this big loud
Yeah.
crash happens and everybody gets scared, but it's really just Dakota being a little clumsy.
Yeah, 100%, and, like, he
It looks like
I
chalk,
don't
though. Like,
it
did you get that
does.
vibe? It kinda looks like chalk?
Like, I don't know because it almost looked, like, glittery, like, there was, like, a shine to it, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, "Is that, like, ectoplasm or, like,
Ooh, you're taking
something?"
it far. I'm like, "Uh-oh." Like,
Uh,
that's pretty crazy, but it could be
mhm.
possible.
Could be possible, but they don't show signs of, like, smelling anything like sulfur or something like
Mhm.
that.
Well, I was
Um,
thinking because we don't see them obviously the whole time that they're exploring,
no.
and if it was the boys' school before, like, to me, I would think, like, there has to be a chalkboard with, like, chalk somewhere,
Mhm,
but even if he did, like, say, back up into, like, a chalkboard, 1, is there chalk that's been there? It's been there for hundreds of years. So, like, 1, what was that? Like, did somebody else, like, break in, put a message on the board? And it is in the shape of a hand. So even if
mhm.
it was shock and he like bumped into it, I don't think that it would have that type of shape to it either.
No, it'd be more of, like, just, like, a scuff or something.
Right, like one mark or like one
Mhm.
line that you would know it was because you bumped into something. So
And even,
it
like, when your shirt, like, bunches up, like, and then you hit something and you spread it out, like, I don't know, it just seemed very like, it looked like a handprint, like, straight up.
and I think that it could have been even explainable maybe if they sat and like thought about it maybe for a little bit because we don't know where else that they've traveled at this point in time inside the sanatorium, but I
Mhm.
think the corroborating evidence is that as soon as they recognize that that hand is there,
Mhm.
Dakota's battery on his camera dies.
Yeah, like, he notices that it's starting to die, and then it's like something's, like, sucking the life out of it, and then it just, like, boop,
And
dies.
for those that may be like more novice too, ghosts tend to drain people's energy or drain energy from like electronic devices or whatever that they
Mhm.
can really find. So this really makes sense and why I say it corroborates this evidence to probably be paranormal is because as they're talking about it, as they just had this experience, then his camera battery dies. So it seems like there might
Mhm.
be an entity that is trying to make itself known even more so than the handprint on Dakota's back because it's taking the energy from the battery of the camera. So if batteries do die, it is said that some sort of spirit is trying to get the energy to either manifest or talk to somebody, communicate. And that's why I think that this moment is like, for me, is like really iconic in the episode because you have
Mhm.
two different events that are corroborating each other in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, and Chelsea even said, like, "We've never had a battery die." And for those cameras, I don't think, like, the batteries die that quickly. Like, I think they can go over definitely over 4 hours. Like, they can probably last, like, a whole night, maybe swapping a battery out, like,
Well, they all
in
change battery
between.
packs at the same time, and it
Yeah.
makes sense, right? Like, you're at your group investigation, you don't want somebody's battery to be the
Mhm.
battery pack from last night who only has an hour on it, and this person has 3, this person has 2.
Yeah.
They all start off with very fresh batteries whenever they go in, and they do
Mhm.
change their batteries at some point in time in the night, but for Dakota's to die and everybody else's to be the same, and they check in on that because Chelsea says, like, "No, I'm good, man." That makes
Mhm.
it even more believable that some sort of entity was trying to draw out, from that battery draining.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's had his ears ringing and handprint, and now his battery is dead. So something's picking on Dakota this time round,
Well, and I
unfortunately.
think Dakota wants answers, right? So they all go
Yeah.
back down to the basement bowling alley area. They take the Ovulus, and the Ovulus, as we've talked about before, is kind of like a spirit dictionary. So they use their energy to pick a word out of this database, and that's what comes up. And when it does come up, the device does say that word, but it is
Mhm.
in the kind of electronic-y voice that's there. So the spirit box, like we talked about before, if that voice comes up, it's usually the voice of that spirit, but
Mhm.
on the Ovulus, it's not. It's just an automated type voice that says one of those words. So they take that down into the bowling alley because they want some answers. And Dakota ends up asking, like, did you try to touch me? Like, are you trying to mess with me? And the answer that he gets is did. Like, I
Yeah.
did.
Like, I already did. I already touched you. I already messed with you. Done. It's like,
Mhm.
ooh,
And to
that's
take it
creepy.
even further, then
Mhm.
they start hearing these footsteps, and then the
Yeah.
device says feet.
Yes, like, it sounds like footsteps. You can clearly hear, like, step, step, and it's just like, "Feet, those are mine. I'm just letting you know I'm here," kinda thing. Wo
Well, and
gross.
because of their area, like, in this kind of, like, sub-basement slash bowling alley, which I think it's
Mhm.
really weird that they have, like, the bowling alley because it's really only, like, what, 2 lanes? Like,
2
if that
lanes.
it's a really small room. I don't know if it was, like, something from the vision, right, of, like, Dr. King where it was John C. King, I think is who we referenced earlier. Like, I don't know if it was his vision to, like, have that play area, so that's why they have the bowling alley in the
Maybe.
basement. I don't really know.
Yeah.
But it's a really small room, but in that room, there is, like, this hallway that connects to the boiler room, so it's sort of this, like, y kind of like maze down there, right? And so
Mhm.
they take the Ovilus to the boiler room because they think that that's where more of the footsteps come from, and they
Mhm.
do try to make contact with, Red, and as soon as Dakota says, like, "Is Red down here?" They hear this loud crash in the
Yeah.
room, and they all type of respond to it.
Mhm. Yeah. And then they hear that, and then words start coming out of the ovulus, and like whether how you take it or not, like the first one that comes out is climb and the second one is march, and to them they took that as a message of leaving. And when I hear that, it's just like when they're kind of walking, they are kind of like marching in a line. So it's just like climb the stairs and march out of here, like get out of here. That's how I took that message. And it like that's kind of like freaky. So they all decide to leave the area, and then they split up into duos around 1 a.m. And we've got Tanner and Dakota back in the basement. And I really think at this time, like Dakota's pushing himself. Like he wants to be down there. He
Mhm.
wants to face his fear. And I give him props to that. Like, props to
For
you, dude.
sure.
Like,
The
I don't
thing
know
that
if
I
I could
think
do it.
about though when that happens, so I've seen other people, and I think it's either like I don't know if it's Sam from Sam and Colby, or I don't know if it's one of the twins from Twin Paranormal, but one of them has this ringing in their ears, and it's a precursor to their attachment. Do you remember which
So,
one? Maybe it's
uh,
maybe it's Sam. Maybe it's Sam because I don't watch as many of those. I mean, I don't really watch the Twin Paranormal as much either, but I was like reading though that like and you noted that it's kind of this in the spiritual world, like there are different like messages that it sends to, but I think
mhm.
it was Sam that had this like ringing in his ear and then he had an attachment from a certain location. And so when you
Oh.
talk about attachments, a lot of the time if you do, they draw you back to that
Mhm.
place that you have all these experiences and that is really dark. So when they split up into duos and Dakota and Tanner go into the basement, and like you said, Dakota's like pushing his boundaries. I wonder though if something was attached to him and that's what made him want to go back down there. Because when you're
Maybe.
attached, like you have an attachment, it's
Mhm.
to usually that place, right? And so when
Yeah.
people have that, they don't want to leave their homes. Like if something bad's happening in there, they like refuse to go to stay at a hotel because they
Mhm.
need to be at that house and something is driving them to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
whenever I was watching this back, I was wondering and putting all these things together as we've been talking, especially with the ringing of the ears. I'm like, I wonder if it wasn't as much as Dakota testing his boundaries with fear, but I wonder if something was telling him to go back in there. Because he
Maybe.
does say at some point in time in the episode that like when they go dark after they do split up into duos and like Tanner's in the boiler room and he's more in the
Yeah.
bowling alley, like they didn't even switch places. You know,
No.
Dakota stays in the bowling alley. He didn't volunteer to go into the boiler room. He tells Tanner
No.
to go in there, and Dakota saying, I'm getting this feeling we should go lights out. Dark. We should go dark."
Yeah. And, like, to not be in the same room together. Like, he wanted to be
Mhm.
separate, and then he's like, "Let's go dark." And I think Tanner's like, "Really?
He's like,
Okay."
"Seriously, man? Like,
Like,
we wanna do
"You
this
wanna
right
do
here,
that?"
right now?"
Yeah, like, and then since Tanner's in the boiler room, he thinks it's dark, it's pitch black, but he still feels like he sees like a shadow like in the corner. And then he shines his flashlight and he's like, I don't feel alone in
Mhm.
here. And then they hear like this metallic object being thrown, and it's kind of like in the middle of them.
Mhm.
So, and then Tanner's like, "What was that?" And like Dakota doesn't know if he can even like sleep down there kind of thing, or if anyone should sleep down there due to last time they were there with Chelsea, the charging. And Tanner is just like, "I can't even explain what that sound was."
No, and, like, Dakota being so affected too, they have 2 people that have been there before and are there right now, and they're getting affected in all of these different ways, so it makes sense why they wanna be like, "Hey, this is probably a cause for concern," right? Like,
Mhm.
do we really wanna put somebody down here knowing that it happened to Chelsea last time and she bailed? She was
Mhm.
like, "Documentary, peace out, I'm done with y'all," and now Dakota's even starting to second guess himself, and he's thinking like, "Should this even be a location on our list for whenever we sleep alone?"
Yeah. And then while they're downstairs, Chelsea and Alex are up on the third floor to the suicide bathroom, where Chelsea kind of starts taking Polaroids, but I don't think she gets anything from that.
Mm,
Um, so they don't really get much evidence. And Alex kind of mentions that he kind of felt more scared like in the basement. But it was so funny because before this was like my LOL moment. I don't know. Like much for you. And I did say this before that I was gonna say sorry to Alex a lot in this podcast.
You're like, all my LOL moments involve Alex because that's just the type of human that he is. So
I don't know if it's just because he's hilarious, but it was so like nonchalant because he's like do like filming. He's like make a noise for us, and then he's just like, you know what? I don't really like feel scared up here because like nothing was happening. And then he's like, I felt more scared in the basement. And then something like immediately makes a sound in the hallway. And his reaction was just like, okay, never mind. I shouldn't have said that. Never mind.
right, never mind. I'm totally scared. I lied. I take it back, which is so funny because like
Oh my God.
if you do have a ghostly spirit, right, and they are listening to you, and
Hmm.
then they say or then they hear you say like, "Hey, I'm not scared." They're going to do something to be like, "I'm here, bitch. Yes, you are. I will make you scared
Well,
in this
even
moment."
he asked it to make a noise, and I feel like, especially with nowadays, people are so like, it has to happen now kind of thing. Obviously, with spirits, things will take a little bit longer, and maybe they have a harder time doing something, and then it does what he asks, and then he's just like, okay, never mind. Like, I shouldn't have said that. That was so funny. I laughed.
It was so funny. He's like, "Okay, never mind. I shouldn't have said that." And then they go right into like trying to kind of like debunk whatever's going on. And so they're
Hmm.
both having their experiences on different floors. And they do decide, like, okay, you know what? Let's go back to base camp. Let's regroup. They get some air outside and they're sitting outside on the stairs, just kind of trying to compose themselves and get ready to sleep alone because they're sleeping alone at this point for like 4 hours. And Dakota he looks terrified, and rightly so, right? Because out of
Hmm.
all of them, it's fucking with Jack, and he's
Oh
already
yeah.
had so much activity, so I'm sure in his point of view, it's like, "Oh my god, now I have to be alone," and it's
Mhm.
already messed with me so much, and Chelsea even says, like, "You know how you get really scared whenever I'm scared? I'm actually feeding off, like, your fear," and she does
Mhm.
mention that, like, fear is contagious, which
Mhm.
I am much more of a believer in just all energy is contagious, right?
Mhm.
Like, if you're around somebody who has a little bit more of, like, a negative, pessimistic type of attitude, you're
Yeah.
gonna feel that, and that's gonna stick with you, and you might be the same way, but if you're with somebody who has a little bit more positive energy, like, then you're gonna feel that, and you're gonna wanna do that as well, so
Yeah.
that's why I think it's so important that Dakota does say, like, "Try not to show the fear," because if one
Mhm.
person does, they're all gonna feed off of that, and then the spirits are gonna feed off of that even more.
Mhm. Oh, definitely. I totally believe that. When where I used to work, it was very like negative. There was a lot of negativity with like such a hard job, and me and one of the girls who was technically a manager, we'd feed off each other. But since I'm an Aries, I'm very stubborn, and sometimes I get a little like crabby, and if someone else is like that, I feed off of it a lot, and I do feed off of other people's energies, like, if someone's excited about something, I'll be excited too, if someone's mad about something, I'll be mad, and, like, I find when I watch something sad, I start crying, so it's very, like
Yeah, and
it's
it makes
very
sense
true.
they talk about that together, because if you are going back in and sleeping alone, like, you need to be able to get right within yourself. And
Mhm.
so I feel like eventually they compose themselves, and then they go
Mhm.
back in and they draw the 4 sleeping arrangements, and for Dakota, poor Dakota, he's in the basement bowling area. There is no way to sugarcoat that. Like, he goes back
No.
to the bowling alley where everything has happened to him tonight, which I think is very on par for his entire
Mhm.
experience thus far. Chelsea's in what they consider the second scariest location, which is the electroshock therapy room. Alex is in the suicide bathroom. And then Tanner's in the east building, and he's in the basement. And for me, my LOL moment of this episode is Tanner. He's sitting there and he's sitting down this very long hallway, and one on one end of the hallway there's a door, on the other end of the hallway it's also a door, so he's standing right in the middle of this long hallway, and he says, "I'm in the east building," which is different. It's different from the building that everybody else is in, so he is
Mhm.
much more secluded than anyone else. So he says, "I'm in the east building. That sucks. I'm in the dark. That sucks. I'm by myself. That sucks." Like, it made me laugh so hard because, like, he's just realizing everybody else is together and he's kinda fucked.
And then if we remember from Trail to Terror, Colin was the one that stayed in here and he got like whispering or something like that. I don't
Mhm.
think he got that much. And then Dakota did mention they did go into the East building, all four of them. They were investigating it. Nothing really happens, but they did feel like somebody was watching them. So Tanner
They
doesn't
made sure to
necessarily
spot,
get out
like,
of this.
a location because
Yeah.
they had that experience from last time, then just feeling that when they went in this time, and I think Tanner thinks he lucks out just because it was down to him and Dakota at the final hat
hmm
draw of, like, who was gonna get the bowling alley, so I feel like he thinks that he really lucked out, but he didn't, and honestly, none of them really luck out at this location.
Well, and then also going back to Trail to Terror, Chelsea and Dakota have swapped rooms.
Mhm.
They get to experience what the other one experienced the last go around. And poor Dakota. he he
Poor
starts
Dakota.
hearing things like right off the bat, unexplained
Mhm.
thuds, tapping, footsteps, shuffling the moment he sits down in that basement. He also kind of begs for whatever is down there to leave him alone, which I do kind of find funny when people do that because it's just like leave me alone, but you want these things to happen because you want to
Mhm.
capture it as well. But he starts to hear something being dragged across the floor, and at one point you can hear something go like tap 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 drag, and it's by him too. It's
It's
close
like,
to
I
him.
feel, like if you're in school and you push a desk and it's like that
Mhm.
linoleum floor,
Mhm.
and you just hear it scrape and it just moves even like 3 feet, that's
Yeah.
what, like, the image that comes to my brain, and I try, like, whenever they do capture some sort of, like, unexplained noise, I try to close my eyes and then hear it, and then
Mhm.
whatever picture comes to my brain, that's kind of like what I've associated the noise with. So when
Yeah.
this happens and that drag happens, that's what I think of as just like scooching your desk out of the way or
Hmm.
putting it on the different side of like your classroom or something to do some sort of activity. It's just
Mhm.
this very like shuffling sound, just like linoleum, a desk being drug across linoleum. So that's what like my first thought is when I hear
Well,
it.
even, like, just thinking of this now, like, he is on a bowling alley, so, like, what if it's someone just, like, getting closer to the line that you're not supposed to cross when you're bowling, and the
Mhm.
drag is the ball? Like,
Yeah, you never
residual
know.
sound, yeah.
For sure, it could be residual, and it could be Red, who is said to be the
Mhm.
spirit that attacks people down there. So I think that it like he more attacks men. I think that's
Yeah,
what Dakota was saying, that like he'll attack men, but then he'll like grope a female.
women,
So
yeah.
I'm sure that Dakota has that in his mind. And then everybody else on different floors and even in different buildings are having their own experiences. Like Alex hears a
Mhm,
noise that sounds like to me is kind of like the hinge of a door opening. Like it
mhm.
creaks, but it also has like that sound of like something going through air, right? Like the
Yeah,
opening of a door. You hear the creak, but you also like I feel like can feel the space being made by a door
mhm.
being opened. And that's what
Yeah,
I think that that noise is. And he responds to it. I don't think that he says like if he thinks what it is, but that's kind of what came to my mind.
yeah, he kinda just is, like, asleep and wakes up and hears a noise and like, "What was that?" And, like, that's kind of all that happens up there, so he kinda lucks out, I think, a little bit. Didn't get to have a full night's rest, but, yeah. And then at one point, Dakota and Chelsea both hear a loud noise, and they show everybody on the screen, but those 2 respond at the exact same time. Her response is so funny because she just, like, sits up and is just like, "Holy crap."
It does. And I think that like there's two themes with Chelsea, right? She either says holy shit or
Yeah.
she says, geez.
Yeah.
Like when they hear the noise when they're in the boiler room during their group investigation, she's like, geez, whenever the big loud noise comes up. But she's like laying flat down in her sleeping bag in her sleeping arrangement where her and Dakota hear this noise. And she just sits totally upright, like freaking Frankenstein. And like the electricity has come on, and she just sits right up and she's like, holy shit.
Which is so ironic because she's in the
In the
electroshock
electroshock
therapy
therapy
room.
room. I know. Like it was like whenever she did that, that was because she looks totally flat. Like
She
she's
looks
laying
so
there
flat.
as if she's asleep. And then she
Yeah.
just comes right out of whatever, like, I
Yeah.
don't know if her eyes were closed or what, but she responds so quickly. So you know it had to have
Ye
been super loud, especially if
yeah.
Dakota's hearing it in the basement. And I think the electroshock therapy room was in the second floor.
Yeah, because she
Because Alex is on the
walkies
third floor in the suicide bathroom.
yeah, but she ends up walking Tanner, and she was like, "Did you hear that?" She walkies him first, and he goes, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." And then she walkies Dakota, and
Mhm.
he's clearly freaking out, like, trying to, like, get all bundled in a sleeping bag and,
Where
like,
he's like,
pulling
"I
out.
definitely heard that." And I think
Mhm.
that, like, she does hear some noises on her own. She's not really sure, like, where they're coming from. She does say, like, "Oh, this feels like a nightmare," but she doesn't get a lot after that. Like, it's some
No.
noises that probably could be attributed maybe to something else or maybe
Mhm.
not, and I think that at this point in time in the road trip, like, she's starting to get used to a lot more of those noises that
Mhm.
can just happen for whatever reason. But
Yeah.
right before the end of their investigation, I think it was like
Mm.
around 6 a.m., Tanner starts to hear footsteps on both sides of
Yeah.
the hallway. Like we had said, he's in the middle, and there
Mhm.
are two sets of stairs on each side of these hallways because he's in the basement. And he hears one noise and he turns in that direction, but then he hears another noise and he turns in the other direction. He's like, oh shit, well, I'm surrounded. And he's sitting
Yeah.
down at this point. But and when he's trying to pan around from like hallway to hallway,
Mhm.
he hears another noise that is so loud that it startles him so badly that he tries to run away from the sleeping direct his sleeping arrangement in the opposite direction, and then he's
Mhm.
trying to figure out like what causes it. But I think that like when he did react, he knew where it was coming from, or he could at least feel that someone was coming up that way
Mhm.
because he runs the opposite direction. And if you're feeling surrounded, you'd probably want to stay exactly where
Mhm.
you are, but he did hear another noise in the opposite direction that made him bolt.
Yeah. He does get a little, like, tangled in a sleeping bag,
He does,
unfortunately.
yes. Kinda, like,
Stumbles a
trips just
little
a
bit.
little bit.
Yeah, like, I couldn't imagine that too, like, what if you, like, fall and trip over something and, like, hurt yourself because 'cause you're scared? Like, that was my first thing, like, what if he, like,
Yeah.
hit his head on something, like, trying to escape? Like
When you can barely see anything when you're running around in
yeah.
a place that is, like, most of the time in total darkness, like, sure, it's, like, 6 AM, I'm sure the sun is coming up at some point in time,
Mhm.
but it's still you're still in the dark, you don't know
Yep.
what's going on, everything is totally unexplainable, and
Yeah.
after that, though, like, they do wrap, and they are, like,
Mhm.
pretty much visibly drained by this location, which makes sense because of all of the activity that's happened. And it would not be an LOL final moment without
Mhm.
Chelsea and Dakota having their sibling relationship dynamic come to play.
No. Yeah. That was so good. Like,
Mhm.
she just Chelsea being Chelsea, being that older sibling, and because she had a rough go the last time, I think in the back of her mind, she was like, "You know what? I'm gonna, like, screw with Dakota a little bit. He's having a rough night." So she decides to just, like, walkie and scare him, and then he was just, like, so mad. He was like, "Why would she do that? I didn't do that to her when she was in here."
I
But
think it's kind
still
of like I'm calling Chelsea out. It's kind of a dick move because before she does that, Dakota had walkied her because he was scared and he wanted to ask her a question or like
oh.
ask her if she heard something because I think she is like the closest to him at this point in
Mhm.
time. And so he walkies her and so he scares her but not intentionally. Now I
Mhm.
will say the entire crew fucks with each other from time to time intentionally by
Yes.
having a really loud walkie check. But this
Mhm.
wasn't one of those times,
Mm-mm.
right? Like it was him legitimately asking her, "Hey, did you hear that?" And she just gets scared in that moment and she's kind of
Mhm.
pissed. She's like, "Well, thanks for sharing your fear with me because now I'm pissed and now
Yeah.
I'm scared." So then later, she pulls a dick move and she like walkies him very loudly and she's like, "Oh, this is for scaring me earlier." He didn't mean to scare you, chick. Like he was like legitimately scared himself and he was wondering if you heard the same noise. So I think Chelsea pulled a dick move. However, if she got revenge from her time at St. Albans
Mhm.
beforehand on Dakota, now they're even.
Yeah, 100%. I I don't think it's a dick move. I thought it was quite funny. I'm one of those people, though, I like to just, like, push
I
push
know, you're
people's
like, the
buttons.
meaner that it is, it's like the funnier that it is, and for me and my, like, empath qualities or whatever, I'm like, "Stop being so mean."
And I'm just like, "But this is hilarious."
Well, and I really wonder, like, final thoughts about the episode. I'm thinking
Mhm.
to myself, like, Dakota says, like, we should never come back here. And to like my knowledge, they don't have any
No.
plans on doing that. And he even says, like, before they leave and get in the RV to leave, he's like, I don't really feel like myself. So if we go on that like theory of like a possible attachment with the ears
Mhm.
ringing and everything else that's going on, when he's saying I don't feel like myself, that's exactly where my mind goes, like, is this some sort of like demonic activity? Did you take something home with you and you knew you were so affected that you were like, I'm never coming back here ever again?
Maybe that would be a great question to even bring up to them. Um, but that would be kind of a cool thing, like, if they were to go back, like,
Mhm.
and do Project Fear, like, they are so much more advanced with everything that they're doing now. Because when was this episode? Like, this was 4 years after Trail to Terror.
2019.
Yeah. So there's been some time, there's been some, knowledge gained and survival skills, and I would really love to see them go back here and see what they get. But I honestly, I'm like a cheerleader for Chelsea this episode. This girl lasted the whole night,
Mhm.
and like I feel like she was able to sleep a little bit, minus Dakota bugging her a little bit. She didn't get that much activity. And
Mhm.
she was so nervous going in. She was annoyed. And it's almost like the spirits were like, you know what? Let's give her a break. Let's join in on your fun and just annoy your brother. And this girl found redemption. Like, good
Mhm,
on you,
and that they
girl.
did. The
Mhm.
spirits went right after Dakota. I don't know if they were just like it was like a revenge type of tour on
I
Dakota
don't
for what he made
know.
Chelsea go through on the last one, but she does kind of like besides her like the noises that she hears, like she does pretty much have like a not as much of an experience, especially as I mean, none of them do as Dakota, but she
Mhm.
got pretty like off scot I won't say scot-free because nothing is when you're spending 4
No.
hours sleeping alone in a haunted location, but she probably has, like, one of the most, like, minimal type of activities.
Yeah.
Now,
Alex didn't
that
get much either, though.
mm-mm. No, and I think that, like, I'm sure, like, that they had other things going on, but Tanner
Yeah.
and, like, his one experience on his home just on his own didn't really compare to anything
Mhm.
that, like, Dakota had went through. Now all of them have their own experiences at our next location, right? So if you would like to
Mhm.
watch along with us, you can stream the season again on HBO Max and Discovery Plus. Next episode, the crew heads to Michigan to another psychiatric hospital, Eloise.
Ooh, yeah, I'm excited for this
Mm.
one. It's gonna be good.
They're
Um,
going with the theme, right? Like we're going from sanitarium to sanatorium to psychiatric hospital. It's three
mhm.
back to back, very explosive locations.
Yes, yes, and we can't wait for you guys to join us and catch us every Thursday, 12 p.m. Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our videos. Ring that notification bell if you want to get notified when we do post. You can also follow us on Instagram. You can follow our personal accounts because we are also posted on there. And yeah, thank you for joining us and being here. And I hope you had a drink too, because my face is red from the gin cocktails and I'm wearing a long sleeve.
Absolutely. We can't wait to hear from you and we can't wait to see you next week. So, cheers, y'all.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.